tonight's presentation is about native seeds. You're going to hear a lot about that. But before we start, I just wanted to first say that we work with the library, we collaborate with them. They've been great partners with us. Over here I have a whole pile of books. And when I find a good book and I ask for it, if they can get it, they purchase it for us. And we're going to try to put a list together, but there's a lot really great books. And one might be helpful tonight, which is Wildflowers of New England. If you have a seed for a plant you don't know what it looks like, you might want to look it up in here. It's a great resource. Ted Elliman, amazing. I had trouble keying out plants in the wild until I started using this, and all of a sudden I became much better. I wouldn't say great, but much better. So the library's been great, and they have a new program that is not native-based, but we collaborate and partner with them. So this is our effort doing the native plant workshops at the library to support their efforts. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Pat Ellis. I'm a senior library assistant here at the library. I've been here for 20 years. And I'm very happy this year to be involved with the establishment of a seed exchange library that will be opening up in March. March 19th is hopefully our go date. We have a program March 5th on growing tomatoes. If you're interested in that, that might be something that this group would like. And what the Seed Library Exchange is going to be is, this year we have purchased seeds that we hope to hand out to people the way we would books. And the whole point of this is to get people to talk to one another about seeds, about the importance of planting, about using the earth in a very positive way. I think that certainly Freddie has gotten the town buzzing. One of the main reasons that the town is buzzing about the importance of what you guys are doing here. Like all great programs, you've got to start at the ground level, and this is it, in educating ourselves, and I think it's just a tremendous program. And I hope that we'll be able to work extensively in collaboration with your organization. We are trying to get some beds outside. We're working on a grant with the federal government right now. We're also working with a Boy Scout group to hopefully get some beds so that we can get people right from the get-go, toddlers, interested in where their food comes from and how to keep it pure and all of those things that you guys are working towards. So I thank you for all your efforts and for educating us. I'm sure there's probably more knowledge in this room right now than in 1,000 books. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And now I want to introduce Sarah Rossitano. She's an Open Space Preservation Commission who's going to talk about a really exciting new project as part of our Native Pollinator, Native Plant Initiative. You don't have to be from Southborough to partake in any of these, but she'll talk a bit about the project for how we're trying to get credit here in Southborough, but anyone in any town can do this.
So the National Wildlife Federation has a program for towns to become certified, and to do that we're starting the process to be certified. It requires the town, people in the town, it doesn't just have to be our commission, but we're working with all different areas of the town, Southborough Open Land we've talked to, a bunch of different people. And we need the town to put on some events to educate the public. Also, you can do this in your own town. Everybody in any town can do it, but we need a certain amount of properties to be certified to make, per how big our town is, to make up a certain amount of points. And then so we're just starting to introduce the public to what it requires to get your property certified. It's a self-check certification, so nobody comes to your property. But basically, some of the main things to provide a better environment for wildlife is having food, water, cover, and places to raise young, and using sustainable practices. So we have a bunch of handouts in the back that you can go and take that will explain, but for example, just food for wildlife, does your yard have berries? Does it have, and this, where it ties into native, you really want to provide them native stuff. They're native birds, you want to give them their native food. You don't want to give them some exotic flower with no real nutritional benefit, just sugar for them. So some native berries. Also, the insects are big for example, 96% of backyard birds rely on them to feed their young. So if we lose the insects, we lose the birds. Water is something as simple as a bird bath or a little puddle, well, I think they call it a butterfly puddle, some marbles in a dish, unless you have a pond. Cover would just be some bushes, dead logs, if you have woods, leave some dead logs for some animals, ground cover, and then also cavity nesters like owls, and some birds will use birdhouses or nesting boxes. And then sustainable gardening would be reducing your water, maybe reducing your grass, because grass provides pretty much nothing for the native wildlife here. So reducing your lawn size, also reducing the water that you use, and reducing or eliminating pesticides, and maybe using compost, and so really all you have to do is employ two from this category. So it's a pretty easy certification to get. Most people have cover, food, and places to raise young. You might have a bird box. So in order to do that, you go online and it shows it all, and there's a checklist, and you just go through, and if you don't have a bird bath or a pond nearby or something like that, you can just put one and then check you're done, and it would count towards Southborough. And so with native plants, that is a sustainable practice would be to use native plants, because native plants are adapted to local soils. They're used to whatever rainfall we get here, and not somewhere where maybe it rains less or more. They're very hardy. They're easier to take. Once they're established, they thrive. You don't have to do much for it. And they support the wildlife, whether it's insects, butterflies, birds, and even small animals. So we're starting that. It's hard to see on here, but I had this presentation, but we couldn't do it. Let me just find one picture that will. Here's an example of. So here's a big house with a big yard and nothing for any wildlife. And then as you plant, you can have beautiful flowers that will provide, say, for monarch butterflies, will provide food and somewhere to lay their eggs, also provide seeds and berries for birds, and then therefore provide food for some smaller animals, and it just goes up the chain. So we're hoping to get people interested and involved to start looking into certifying and tying it in with the Native Plant Initiative, because we think it's very important. And we're going to work towards speaking with the schools, and we have some certified properties already, and as far as big properties, we have Breakneck Hill in town is certified. We'd love to work with the schools and get the schoolyards certified and bring it to some programs in for the kids to explain that. So that's what we're working towards right now.
There are handouts out back that have it, but it's the National Wildlife Federation. I want to thank Sarah because there's nothing more terrifying than giving your first presentation and the computer won't talk to the projector. So, thank
I'm
you,
not-
Sarah. But she's not terrified. I was terrified for her. This is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and we're going to be rolling out big events and year-long. And our goal, I think, is 170 points for certified yards, 1 point a yard, or 3 points for, conservation land. But that's a lot of property, but it's get everyone out there looking and thinking how they can do better. And there's lots of material back there, handouts.
Yes, and they should all have the website on it. The main one, this Garden for Wildlife, explains it, and then it has an application. You can do it online, you don't need a physical application, but on the back, it does show a checklist, and it will say, for food sources, you must have 3, for water, just 1. And so there's 5 categories that I talked about, and then when you do that, they give you, I think, magazine
And some of those are on display too. And what's the point? Question?
Are the points based on the size of your town, or?
Yes, population, how many, but there's additional points in categories like administration, public outreach, and education. So this event tonight will get us points in one of those also. So, because it's a community, not just individual. Individual yards are great, but we want the whole town, and wouldn't it be proud? I believe Concord is trying, and that's a great town to kind of let's see if we can get there first. But they're way ahead of us, and there's a couple of other towns in the state, but it's, we want this to be, everyone looking at how they're managing their yards. But I don't want to take up time because this is a hands-on, and I could talk on and on about how great this program is and all of our activities, but I want to introduce Ellen Souza. She's here tonight to help us sort through seeds we collected at Breakneck Hill from our native wildflower gardens. She's an author. This is a book. You can get it here at the library. She's also a garden coach and a garden designer. She's been working with us at Breakneck Hill since our first pollinator garden we installed. I don't know how many years it's been, and I mean, she's an amazing asset for this town, as well as she helped us with the Senior Center pollinator garden, and we look forward to many other programs with her. So come on up, Ellen.
What I've done is I have been storing the seeds that were collected. I think it was in end of October. We had a day where we collected seeds from various of the native plants that are planted, both in the pollinator gardens at Breakneck Hill, the planted gardens, as well as other native plants that happen to be growing on that property. So what we've got here is all these bags are the result of that seed collection. They really should have been cleaned. I think this workshop was originally planned to happen in early November, but for all sorts of reasons it didn't happen. So these seeds have been sitting in these paper bags in my workshop, which is an unheated workshop, so they've been sitting in cold conditions since then. But just to start off with a point that a lot of these seeds may have lost quite a bit of viability in the fact that they haven't been cleaned properly in the last couple of months. They're still waiting for that. So we're a little bit late on getting the seeds cleaned. But what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through various species, different native species that we collected. I'm going to take out a couple of the ones that are a little bit more difficult, a little bit more less straightforward to clean and extract the seeds. And then we'll sort them out and put them into little envelopes, and all of you will be welcome to take home some seeds at the end of the workshop. So if there are particular species that you're interested in, make sure you sort of get dibs on them early in the process. So I'm going to move over away from the microphone. If you want people to come up. I think that probably the best way, because this is really, it's kind of it's a hands-on process. I mean, this workshop is really just to get the seeds ready to be sowed in February. And I'm actually going to start with bottled gentian, because somebody just mentioned to me, somebody came in, was it you that came in and mentioned that you'd had trouble with bottled gentian? And I'm just going to pull that one out now and do that right away. So, it will help to illustrate some of the challenges with growing native plants from seeds. Some of them are just not straightforward. Some of them actually need a little bit of care and attention. Now, actually, this first one, it's called bottled gentian. It's a purple wetland plant. It's got little blue flowers that bumblebees, they're rich in nectar, but they're closed bottles is what they actually look like, and bumblebees will try to pry their way into the flowers, but it is one of their favorites. Now this one, so I've just basically, I've got the seeds here in the. This one is actually pretty straightforward to clean, because I basically just shook them out, and if you look in the bowl there, the seeds have actually just come right out. They're very tiny, but you can see how they've already self-extracted themselves.
Yep.
So this is going to be fairly easy to work on. I'm actually just picking up the remaining pods, the seed pods here, and I'm doing what's called threshing. And what threshing is, it's a term that describes separating the chaff or the various leaves and flower parts from the actual seed. The term threshing is used, you might be familiar with it. It was a term that was used in agriculture when growing crops like wheat. And they had to separate the chaff from the seed to get the grains out of the wheat. So this is what we're doing basically. We're just threshing these seeds on a very manual basis here. And this is, the process is really pretty basic. You don't need lots of expensive tools, etc. It's really easiest just to do it by hand, I have found. But you'll see already this was pretty simple to extract the seeds from there. Now these seeds are really tiny. So what I'm actually going to do, these don't even need to be sifted. I can find the bag that they came in. Is it this one? I'm just going to put these back for now.
Was that a pod, or was just a flower that they came out of?
There was
Bit of a pod.
Yeah, there is a pod inside
Yeah.
there. There's a little dry pod inside the dried
Okay.
flowers. And I mentioned it, we should have probably done this a few months ago, and there's one of the reasons for trying to clean the seeds as soon as possible after you collect them is that a lot of seed pods, especially potted seeds, have little bugs that will burrow their way in and will eat the seeds. So I'm actually looking at one right here that looks as though somebody's been living in there. So the ones that have been extracted here, they look pretty clean. They look as though they are good to go. They don't even need to be sifted in the sieve, because there's really very little plant material. These are easy, this one, to collect. And now I've got static electricity has stuck them all to the bottom of the bowl, so that's a good reason to not use a plastic bowl. I generally tend to use just these just little stackable glass bowls, clean and dry. But as you can see, they're still sticking here, so I'm just going to try to scrape them off. And
Ellen, can I ask if I went out tomorrow and got some? Because I know where there are some.
the bottled gentians
Yes,
at Bregnick Hill. Yep.
I'm not telling.
At the secret location.
Do I have to, or if somebody had them where they knew and you collected some, can you still collect them and dry them and get them ready this winter sow, or is it too late?
It may be too late. It really depends. I mean, these seeds, there could be, they could have had mice foraging on them. They could have even had birds
There are lots of seeds on this plant.
So if there's lots of seeds and they haven't been eaten, then they probably could still be harvested now. And it really, the telltale sign is whether they're dried and,
These were pretty wet.
yeah, and that's the problem, is that if they're wet, if they're very wet, they may have already rotted. You know,
Okay.
that's you know, one of the things that can happen. But these, you know, we collected these early, we kept them in a paper bag, and they're very dry, so these are good. But I mentioned that they're very tiny, and that is one of the important things about sowing native plants from seed, is if the seeds are very tiny, you do not want to bury them in a winter sowing container. One of the reasons why oftentimes these tiny seeds will fail if you're trying to propagate them from seed is that they shouldn't be buried. They need exposure to light actually to germinate. So that's where things get tricky, and that's when the winter sowing workshop that is happening in February will explain how to sow these seeds right on the top of the soil surface in the containers, and maybe just cover them with a teeny little bit of sand that keeps them from blowing away or being washed away, etc. But the sand actually still allows the light to reach these tiny seeds. So if you had trouble with these, with this particular seed, bottle Gentiana, it may be that they just didn't have that light. They do need light to germinate.
So a question about in nature, how do they loosen up and disperse? Is it through animals, or does the pod at some point break open? Wind? What causes it to happen in nature?
It varies by species. It's, I mean, the seed process,
But bottle gentian specifically.
Oh,
since
specifically.
That's what we're talking about.
Oh, right, yep. Well, it's a process of the flower of the seed embryo having enough time to develop in the seed pods, and then since these ones are really, really tiny, most of the time with this, I think bottle gentians, the pods just in the end just split open. Yeah.
Thank you.
But you know, sometimes that's aided and abetted by birds,
Right.
et cetera, or
Yeah.
rodents or mice especially. They really love seeds too, which is why it's a miracle we still have any seeds left here. Because, as I said, I've been storing these in our unheated workshop for the last couple of months, and we do have dogs that patrol the workshop through the winter. So hopefully no seeds, you know, no mice have invaded. But that's definitely one of the issues. So what I just did actually was I just used this little funnel. I poured all the seeds into this one little container here, but at the end of this workshop, what I think I'm going to have everybody do is if you would like seeds from a particular species, use this funnel and then siphon off a few of them and put them in a container and take them.
And how many is a few?
A few, well, I mean, there's got to be 1,000 seeds in this, at least in this little bowl. So, you know,
Divided by 20.
yeah, right. Depending on how many you want. I mean, really, honestly,
All right.
you know, a little grouping of 20 to 30 seeds should keep people happy if you're looking to grow that species.
Here's a picture of it. And can I just ask, how many people are on the Facebook group Native Plant Gardens of Southborough? It's a Facebook group. If you do Facebook, ask to join. I will post pictures of this and amazing bumblebees, how they use the plant. It is just stunningly beautiful and incredible. So it's an important bumblebee plant for rare bumblebees, as well as, it's just a great fun plant too.
You said it was, it likes the wetlands?
Yeah.
It does, yeah. It's considered a wetland plant in that it grows kind of on the edges of ponds and areas that are flooded
But we
regularly.
have some damp undershrubs, not wetland, that it's thriving in.
Right, absolutely. It's the soil moisture is really what determines where it is. It does not like dry soil. So I'm going to move.
Later to September, didn't it? I'm trying to
They're
think
late.
of bloom time, late,
Yep.
later to September,
Yeah, those are late. Yep.
That's nice.
So if anyone wants to see this.
It's a pretty
Yeah, and those actually, it's a really beautiful blue
Yeah,
color,
yeah,
an
gorgeous
unusual
plant.
blue too. It's a beautiful plant. Not one that you're going to find in nurseries just about anywhere, and that does that's kind of underlines the importance of what we're doing tonight, which is getting seeds, making seeds available for people to grow. Nurseries, a lot of nurseries don't carry this is definitely changing. There are certainly some good nurseries around that are starting to supply native plants. However, many of the native plants that they do offer are called cultivars. Cultivars being a selection of, a native plant that's been selected for some attribute. Usually, nurseries selling cultivars means that they've made a selection of a plant based on its usually more flowering, more floriferous, or it has a different color, a brighter color, etc. But cultivars are really not, if you're thinking about the grand scheme of supporting wildlife with your native plants, cultivars are not generally a good idea to grow, to plant, because they are genetically identical. So that most of the nursery industry uses something called tissue culture to propagate their plants. So they'll have a one plant that they'll propagate so that it's into clones. And so what you're buying is a clone. It's a genetic clone. And what that means is it's exactly the same as every other plant that's grown under that name, that cultivar name. And it may actually still be, it's a selection of plants. When they make these selections, they're not, at least up until recently, they are certainly, plant breeders are not looking at pollinator compatibility when we're making plants available to the public. So there are some cultivars that may have nectar, may have pollen available that our native wildlife can use, but in a lot of cases they may have lost they don't produce pollen, they don't produce nectar. If they have, many cultivars have double flowers, so they're really multiple petaled flowers, etc. That make it very hard for pollinators to actually access the nectar in the flower. So the general rule is try to avoid cultivars as much as possible, and try to grow. Growing, this is like a grassroots movement, but this is really the best thing that we can do for biodiversity in our own backyard is growing these native plants from seed, because we're adding to the genetic variability of the species. Instead of using genetically identical clones, we're growing the offspring of, we're growing seed-grown plants. Each of one is genetically a little bit different. Genetic diversity is one of those really important things that helps to maintain species resilience. So that's why we are, really trying to encourage people to grow their own plants from seeds here today. So I'm pulling out Blue Flag Iris is my next one, and I'm not going to use the plastic pot this time. I'm actually going to use the chicken water bowl. This is another one this one's actually really easy because it does have pods. It was very obvious when we collected these that the pods were dry and starting to split open and release the seeds. So that's a key to telling you when seeds are ripe, is if you see the pod already starting to open up out in the field. Timing can often be pretty crucial to get seeds just before they're ejected out into the universe or carried away by the wind. And this is Blue Flag, and this also looks like it's had some kind of insect residence in these pods. But these are really big, hard seed pods. They're almost like apple. They're almost like apple seeds. So they're easy to clean. If they were a little bit smaller, I would run them through the sieve. But again, these are really big seeds, so these don't even really require any kind of sifting. Just kind of pull the seeds out, and then you definitely want to get rid of this plant material here. And this is kind of just a hands-on process that I do in the fall. One thing about seed cleaning is it's one of those things that you just need to do when you're not in a hurry, because you need to just sit down somewhere and just sift these things with your own hands. There are seed threshing products that you can buy, but those are really for large-scale producers of seed. For what we're doing here. For what we're doing here, hands-on is really just the best way. I do have a little pair of very sharp tweezers that I occasionally use to try to clean the seeds. I'll find some of the seeds that where I can demonstrate how you need to really remove that seed from the chaff by hand.
I find it very hard when you collect these seeds in the wild. In my garden, I pretty much know the name of the plants, but in the stage when they're ripe, they have the flower colors usually gone. Sometimes they don't have leaves. It's really hard to find, even if we have these nice books, to find. I mean, milkweed also, they have distinguished, you see, because they're so special. But all these little things, it's really hard to figure out what kind of plant that is.
It is, yep,
Is
absolutely.
it really a flower? Maybe it's a, it's a weed, not a weed, but something else,
Yeah.
So it's really hard to figure out when they're in this stage,
When they
what kind of plant
Yeah,
that
right.
is.
Yeah, because usually the seed collection is done. The seeds usually ripen for about sometimes a month or 2 months after the flowers.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
this is where a knowledge of the plants earlier in the season, and sometimes even actually marking the plants with a little bit of
Yeah.
tape so that later in the season
Yeah.
you'll find them. Because it is definitely true. Late in the season, when you start looking for plants, they all look. Well, it's very hard to
Just
identify
brown
them.
and yeah.
So I have this bag that says Blue Iris.
That's definitely not blue. Ooh.
Well, so
Oh,
yes,
there's been some-
and then I threw some other stuff in there. So, the difference
That's
between
tricky.
Ellen's bags and mine. So do you
You have
see,
multiple species.
do you see this, if anyone wants to separate those, see
Yeah.
the apple seed ones?
The apple seed. What looks like the apple seeds are the blue flags.
So if somebody wants to do that, instead of just sitting there listening, you could do that.
Yeah, actually, I'm
Or if
really
you don't
going
want
to,
those?
we, as you can see, we have a lot of bags of different seeds, so I need to really move along. I think that actually what the best way to do is, how about if we have a volunteer that can sit in each of those bags and take some of these sieves and start cleaning them.